Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Afghanistan, 15 people have been killed and over 30 others injured in a car bomb attack in the eastern province of Nangarhar. Officials say security forces killed the gunmen who tried to enter the compound of Ghani Khail district's governor after the blast. Fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan rages on for a 7th day despite calls for a ceasefire by major world powers. Azerbaijan's defense ministry said the entire region of Nagorno-Karabakh is witnessing intense battles. Meanwhile, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Ankara stands by the oppressed in the region. In Sudan, the government and the rebel groups have inked a peace deal aimed at ending decades of war in which tens of thousands died. Representatives from all the sides, as well as the guarantors of the deal from the African Union and the United Nations, signed the deal in Juba. US President Donald Trump has been taken to a military hospital hours after he tested positive for COVID-19. The White House press secretary said Trump will work in a special suite at the hospital for the next few days as a precautionary measure. Meanwhile, India's COVID-19 death toll has topped 100,000, while the infections steadily climbed to 6.47 million. In Pakistan, 8 people died from the virus overnight, taking the country's death toll to over 6,500. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1 million lives, infecting more than 34.4 million people. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. 15 people have been killed in a car bomb attack in the eastern Afghan province of Nangarhar. More than 30 people were injured. Officials said the security forces killed the gunmen who tried to enter the compound of Ghani Khail district's governor after the blast. The Nangarhar governor's spokesperson has confirmed the casualties. A member of the provincial council said at least 8 of those killed in the attack are civilians. 8 media organizations have slammed the continuous vilification of journalists in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In a joint statement, the organization said media in the territory has paid a heavy price to stay neutral and objective about politics and facts. The statement said for decades it has been reporting impartially on the atrocities in the Srinagar city of occupied Valley. It said the organizations regret the propaganda aimed at bringing a bad name to Kashmiri media. The media body said such vilification serves the interest of the people behind these shameful acts, but it eventually hurts Kashmir. It added, Kashmir media stands united to defeat the ill designs of such elements. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communication blackout since August the 5th last year. Fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan rages on for a 7th day despite calls for a ceasefire by major world powers. Azerbaijan's defense ministry said the entire region of Nagorno-Karabakh is witnessing intense battles. Armenia's defense ministry said it shot down 3 Azeri aircrafts, a claim denied by Azerbaijan. Earlier, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara stands by the oppressed in the region. Meanwhile, a French attempt to relaunch peace talks has so far showed no sign of a breakthrough. The dispute is centered on the control of the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which is recognized as part of Azerbaijan but controlled by ethnic Armenians. In Sudan, the government and the rebel groups have inked a peace deal aimed at ending decades of war in which tens of thousands died. Representatives from all the sides, as well as the guarantors of the deal from the African Union and the United Nations, signed the deal in Juba. The vice president of the Sudanese transitional government called the agreement a proud moment for the country. The peace deal was agreed in principle in August, and an intense mediation process resulted in the final agreement. Iran has called on the international community to mount pressure on Israel to destroy its nuclear arsenal. In his address at the UN General Assembly, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Israel should promptly accede to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Zarif said Israel has been deceiving the world for decades about its clandestine development of nuclear weapons. He said Israel should be compelled to submit to the most intrusive inspection regime. Zarif also criticized the US, calling it world's only perpetrator of a nuclear attack and giving blind support to the only possessor of the nuclear arsenal in the Middle East. The 75th UN plenary meeting was attended by nearly 100 foreign ministers to commemorate the International Day for the total elimination of the nuclear weapons. In Pakistan, 8 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 6,507. The Health Ministry says over 500 more tested positive overnight. It said there are 8,884 total active cases in the country. The ministry said out of over 313,000 detected cases, more than 298,000 have recovered so far. It said over 137,000 cases have been detected in Sindh province, while over 99,000 have been reported in Punjab so far. The National Command and Operations Centre said 735 hospitals are providing facilities to 717 patients admitted across the country. US President Donald Trump has been taken to a military hospital hours after he tested positive for COVID-19. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1 million lives, infecting more than 34.4 million people. More in this report.
Even after almost a year, the coronavirus is far from over, not sparing even high profiles. Global shares and the oil market have been struck after the news of US President testing positive. The White House press secretary said President Donald Trump will work in a special suit at the hospital for the next few days as a precautionary measure. News has sent a shudder across the country, drawing sympathies from the citizens.
You know, it's very sad, but we keep them in prayer and that they'll recover. I'm sure they're in good medical care, and he'll be back and hopefully for the next debate. And I love our president. I think we need him back in office for the second term.
Meanwhile, the situation in Europe continues to deteriorate. The French authorities have warned that Paris can be put on maximum alert, while Spain is extending drastic restrictions across its capital, Madrid. Poland as well as the UAE have reported the highest number of infections in one day since the pandemic began. The World Health Organization has urged to strengthen the responsive measures against the pandemic.
We urge every single leader to strengthen their response, put targeted measures in place that we know can suppress the spread, ensure that health systems and workers are protected, and saves lives.
Over in Asia, India's COVID-19 death toll has topped 100,000, while the infections tally climbed to 6.47 million, while South Korea's new infections stayed below 100 for the third straight day. But health authorities remain on alert over a potential rebound in infections.
China has accused the US of fabricating lies and trying to take the world back to the jungle age. This comes after Washington accused Beijing and the UN agencies of murdering millions of baby girls through forced abortions. In a statement, China's UN mission spokesperson said some US politicians are undermining multilateral cooperation with their statements. The spokesperson said the US is becoming the biggest destroyer of the existing international order. Meanwhile, the UN Population Fund said it regretted the accusations by the US. Talking to media, UNFPA Executive Director Natalia Kanem said the coercion of women is against the UN practice and policy. She said the UN has called on the US to review its programs in China, but Washington has been declining the calls for the past 4 years. US National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien says Russia has agreed not to interfere in the November presidential election in the US. In a tweet, O'Brien says he has held a constructive dialogue with the Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev in Geneva. O'Brien said they also discussed a number of bilateral issues of mutual interest. He said arms control, the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, Syria and Afghanistan were on the agenda. O'Brien said while they have differences, he is optimistic two sides can make progress in key areas that will benefit the American and Russian people. Meanwhile, a Russian spokesperson said both the sides confirmed the absence of intention to meddle in each other's internal affairs, including elections. He said the talks took place in order to normalize bilateral relations and strengthen international security. Early voting has begun in New Zealand's general election. Prime Minister and Labour Party leader Jacinda Ardern has cast her vote as she seeks a second term in the office. The Election Commission said voters can head to the advanced polling till the final election day on October the 17th. About 450 advanced polling stations have been opened across the country. The Commission said advanced voting has become more popular as it accounted for 47% of all votes in 2017 and hopes to reach at least 60% this year. New Zealanders are also voting on two other issues of legalizing recreational cannabis and euthanasia. Ardern's Labour Party, governing in a coalition with the Greens, faces the Conservative National Party in a pandemic-dominated campaign. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has warned the Brexit trade talks are running out of time. Talking to reporters in Brussels, Leyen said the UK and the EU have made progress in many fields, but the most difficult ones are still open. She said the two sides should intensify the negotiations. However, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson insists it is up to the European Union whether the two sides reached a trade agreement. He said the bloc should hand Britain a similar deal like the one it did with Canada.
I hope that we'll get a deal. It's up to our friends. There we are. They've done a deal with Canada, a long way away, of the kind that we want. Why shouldn't they do it with us? We're so near. We've been members for 45 years. Like, it seems all there. It's just up to them.
Mexico has deployed 26,000 troops along its southern border to block a migrant caravan heading to the country to cross into the U.S. But speaking to the media, President López Obrador said Mexico wants to avoid a confrontation with the caravan. Obrador said the timing of the caravan ahead of the U.S. presidential election is strange and raised suspicion. Head of the Mexican Migration Authority, Francisco Garduno, told media migrants must respect the immigration law. He said the authorities won't let anyone from the caravan enter into Mexico. Thousands of Honduran migrants are traveling through Guatemala, heading for the U.S. via Mexico. Hundreds of Mexicans took to the streets to mark the 52nd anniversary of the Tlatelolco Square massacre. 1968 security forces stormed a student protest, killing at least 30 people, while activists claimed 300 people were killed. Heavily armed police were present at the protest site to quell any violence. Demonstrators threw rocks at the police as they blamed state intelligence, rather negligence, for the 1968 massacre and lack of justice. Protesters also spoke against the feared massacre of 43 students in 2014, saying little has changed in Mexico over the decades.
Don't let it be what happened in 1968 massacre and everything that has happened since. I believe that repression still happens, that is repression by the state. Rather than serving the people, it just looks after its own interests.
More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Italy's far-right leader Matteo Salvini has appeared in the court for illegally detaining more than 100 migrants at sea in 2019. Judge Nunzio Sarpito is presiding over the closed-door hearing. Prosecutors in the Sicilian city of Catania accused Salvini of abusing his powers as the then interior minister. Salvini had ordered 131 rescued migrants to remain on a ship for 6 days until other states decided to take them. It will be up to the preliminary hearing judge to decide if the case is strong enough for the trial to proceed. Salvini says his former government supported him in his decision to deny the landing of the migrants in Italy. If found guilty, Salvini can be sentenced with 15 years in jail as well as barred from holding a political office in future. In Chile, hundreds took to the streets of Santiago against President Sebastián Piñera's government. Riot police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse stones-throwing demonstrators. Protesters demand the approval of the drafting of a new Magna Carta in the referendum that will take place on the 25th of October. Tensions in the country grow 2 weeks before the anniversary of a social outbreak which began on 18th of October last year. The mass demonstrations saw thousands killed, injured and arrested, with billions of dollars worth of damage and losses to businesses. Paraguay has declared a national emergency for 90 days as wildfires burnt vast swaths of the Chaco forest, which is home to many indigenous tribes. The National Emergency Secretariat said it detected over 5,000 fires in 24 hours in Chaco region. The National Emergency Secretariat chief called the region a breeding ground for forest fires, with no rain expected and air temperatures soaring. Authorities said 2 firefighting aircrafts have arrived in the country and will douse the most heavily impacted regions. They said all the fires that have been generated are controlled, but they have not won the battle yet. Paraguay's Directorate of Meteorology said it does not expect rainfall until October the 7th. In the U.S. state of California, fire crews have adopted a defensive stand and are battling nearly 24 wildfires burning in the foothills of Napa Valley. The National Weather Service have forecast a return of high winds and hot weather over the next 2 days, sparking fears of uncontrolled fires. The emergency officials said more than 2,500 firefighters are battling the grass fire that broke out on Sunday. They said the blaze has destroyed 248 homes and other structures, with 52,000 residents asked to evacuate. The officials said only about 5% of the grass fire has been contained so far. The 2025 season in the U.S. has so far killed 30 people in California since August the 15th, while 10 have died in Oregon and Washington. A week-long holiday in China is full of celebrations across the country. Authorities say a total of 108 million domestic tourist trips have been recorded so far, with tourism revenue reaching 76.5 billion yuan. What festivities made Chinese travel? Let's take a look at this report.
Celebration vibes are full on in China's holidays that started with the National Day and include the Mid-Autumn Festival. Light shows, carnivals, food festivals and group weddings, every event has been spectacular. Group weddings for some 300 couples were held simultaneously in 7 places in northwest China's Shaanxi province. Couples holding the national flags mixed National Day celebrations into the ceremonies.
As we were occupied with our work previously, we did not have a wedding after we obtained our wedding certificates. So this wedding today also realized a dream of mine. I think this is a quite memorable day.
In the coastal city of Weihai in East China's Shandong province, a fresh oyster festival was put up, which attracted foodies and tourists to feast on. In another food festival, villagers gathered to have noodle together, as noodle symbolizes longevity in the Chinese culture. Over in Wuhan, Chinese cultural items including paper cuts, clay sculpture, and oiled paper umbrella are being offered to tourists.
Wuhan's epidemic situation is now under control, and the city will open all its scenic spots to tourists for free as a gratitude to the people's support in our fight against the epidemic. As an inheritor of intangible cultural heritage, I hope to make my part of contribution.
Other than delicacies, sightseeing is being popular too. The second longest river in China, the Yellow River, is one of the places that has drawn a huge number of tourists.
A group of Palestinian teenagers has been practicing parkour in the blockaded Gaza Strip among the damaged buildings and rubble. Let's take a look at this report.
Leaping on a building and flipping through the air, jumping over obstacles, these Palestinian parkour athletes hope to make a name for themselves. The boys are leaping to new heights without formal training.
I have been doing parkour for 2 years. Now I'm 14 years old. We have to prefer these abandoned areas because there is no alternative.
Despite the opposition of their families, they resume their activity, which involves climbing and running over buildings and grounds. They have another obstacle which they must leap over, that is the lack of support and facilities.
We gathered for training in an abandoned area close to everyone. We don't have a stadium or a club. We prefer such demolished places to demonstrate our sports. We couldn't find anyone to support us.
In spite of Israeli blockade of Gaza Strip and West Bank, the determined group of parkour athletes resumes the urban activity. Palestinian authorities say Israeli airstrikes have damaged thousands of houses in the Gaza city. Some 65,000 Palestinians were left homeless in Gaza, where infrastructure was badly damaged due to the attacks.
Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.